Hey, welcome back. This is Dali. And if this is the first time that you listen to this podcast, I want to thank you for tuning in. I have been trying to share more diverse topics here on this podcast. And I realized that like all of last year, I shared a lot of parenting topics. And though this podcast is supposed to talk also about, we're supposed to touch on topics of bullying and diversity and stuff like that, I haven't done enough of that. So today, I would like to talk about teaching children to forgive the people who have bullied them. This is something that's really hard for a lot of people, myself included, because when you are hurt really bad by someone, it really takes a lot of energy to get to that place where you can genuinely forgive that person. Because sometimes you're so angry about the harm and the hurt that they've caused you that you just can't get past it. And I'm going to be honest, I used to think when I used to hear people say, like, oh, you're forgiving, not for them, but for yourself, I was like, blah, 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 whatever. That's like BS, whatever. I don't want to hear that crap. I know, very petty, right? But I mean, I'm just being real. That's how I was. And then I learned, and I think it was because of how it was explained to me, I learned what people mean about forgiveness is more for you than for the other person. And it took a lot of work for me to get to that place. And I was able to do it, right? So I've been reading this book from Jen Sincero. It's called You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. So here is the cover of the book. And I'm gonna be super, super honest. I really don't think it has a ton of like ahas in here, but it does have really good information that we've probably all heard. I don't know if I guess I shouldn't generalize, but if you are the type of person who has read a lot of self-help books, a lot of the information in here, it's like, oh yeah, I've read that before. However, she does have these really great examples on how to get to that place of forgiveness. And I wanted to share that with you because, man, I struggled so much to get there. And this is so funny. I was reading it to my kids because sometimes the way that people explain things can really give you that aha moment, right? But she says, one of the things that you can do to forgive somebody is by finding compassion for that person, which I've heard that before, right? But I think it's like how she approaches it that can really help some people who are still not able to find compassion for that offender. So I'm going to read it. Okay, this is page 124. One of the best tricks for doing this is to imagine the person you're resentful of as a child, as a kid. Think of this little person acting out of fear, doing the best they can to protect themselves and attempting to deal with their own suffering in the only way they know how. People act poorly because they are in pain or confused or both. Understanding this and imagining the person who you want to behead as a sweet little innocent child with big puppy dog eyes will help you find compassion for them, which is the key to forgiveness. You two are just a little bunny trying to work it all out. Find compassion for your sweet little sippy cup self and let it go. As I read that, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I never would have thought to imagine my offender as a child who hasn't offended me yet, right? And this brought me to have a conversation with one of my kids and my husband, because I've heard this conversation before, right? Or this prompt, this question, whatever you want to call it. And some people have asked, if you were to go back in time and find baby Hitler, would you kill baby Hitler? And I was like, whoa, that is heavy. Holy crap. Who thought of this question? That's horrible, to kill a baby. And some people were like, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And some people are like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Because the first thing I think of, when I see a baby is my own kids. So everybody has a different set of values and different moral compass, a different set of emotions. And I know the compassion part, I think, is a human thing that we do even when we don't want to. And it has a lot to do with visuals, right? So if you see somebody who has done something terrible to you, and if you see them as a child, maybe being hurt by others, then you're going to find compassion for that person. Although that, like they've done X, Y, and Z to you, right? So a lot of people don't have the patience to do this. And a lot of people don't even like going there because they don't want to feel the compassion for somebody who has hurt them. And that's just something that you have to decide, like, how are you going to approach it? Because at the end of the day, a bully is not hurting others simply for joy, though it might seem like it. Now, those who do it for joy, they have psychopath type of issues. That's a whole different type of person and level there. But if you look back at why people are so mean to others sometimes, there's always a backstory. There's always a story of when they were younger or at some point in their adult life, this was done to them, and they feel so on guard that they have to now act this way. And usually it's not usually, but sometimes that way that they find is going to work for them is not very nice. I am going to admit something. I've said this, I think, before in the podcast, or if not on this podcast, on other podcasts, that when I arrived to the United States, I was bullied very heavily, right? And I remember the first time I actually had a friend, somebody who actually came and was by my side and thought I was worthy to speak to, although she saw I was being bullied. Then the two other girls that were bullying me, they saw her as this chubby, worthless little child. And she was like, oh, Emily's talking to you, and talking smack. And I felt, for some reason, that I had to now prove myself to these girls because of what they were saying and how they were treating me. And it kind of made me feel like I had to now go and mistreat Emily. So Emily was she was on a swing, and the girls were saying stuff to her. I don't remember what they were saying, but I remember they expected me to do something to her. So I went behind her and I pretended that I was helping her on the swing by pushing her, but I used my foot and I actually hurt her. To this day, I regret that. I regret that very, very much, because I remember watching her grab her, she put her hand on her lower back and she was like, ow, that really hurt. And it wasn't like, oh my God, that really it wasn't like excruciating pain, but I hurt her. And as soon as that happened, I immediately regretted it, because I knew it was wrong. And I knew that I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And I actually didn't want to, but I felt the pressure to do that to her because of these two girls who were bullying me. So it was like if you can't beat them, join them, or like a technique for survival where, you're going to become what they're doing to you in order to appear strong when really you're not. So every person who does something bad to another person has experienced something at one point in their lives, and most people don't want to hear about that. That's why I think there's such a big debate about how to treat prisoners, and some people are like, let them be, who cares, they committed a crime, therefore they should deserve everything that they're getting. And others like, no, wait a minute, these people, they're just victims of their experiences and nobody was there to teach them any better. So anyway, that's a whole another conversation. So her, Jen Sincero, her first recommendation is find that compassion. Imagine that person as a child. The other thing that I really liked was that you have to also try to erase the other person from the equation. So she gives this example, and it's on page 125. Another option is to picture yourself hanging out in your brand new boat, and an empty boat floats up and bangs right into you, leaving a scratch. If there's nobody in the boat, there's nobody to get mad at, and you deal with the situation in a much calmer, inquisitive way. If there's some moron driving that other boat who bangs into you because they're checking on text or whatever, you deal with it by going crazy and calling them a bunch of names that relate to genitalia. I mean, that's not everybody, but that's the example she's giving, right? Again, the same exact situation, you get a scratch on your boat. Two different ways to react. And that is so true. Man, I thought about that. I was like, that is so stinking true. And just recently I was in the car with another person, and we were merging into the highway, and this person like raises a shoulder and tries to cut in front of us. And so the driver with me is like, what the heck are you doing? Blah, 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 And it's like, okay, why are you so mad that this person's trying to cut in? But imagine if it were a car that just like accidentally, it's unoccupied and it just like rolled right into you. Would you act the same way? Probably not, because there's nobody in the car to argue with, right? So that's what she means about erase the other person from the equation. So, hey, if that works for you, go for it. But I thought that was a really good way to think about how to forgive this person. Because it really, she says, if you have nobody to be angry at, it's hard to be angry. And it's so, so true. And the other thing is, decide you'd rather be happy than right. So I like that one too, because there's people who just want to be right regardless. They want to have the last word. They just keep going, and deep down that you're right. And this also reminds me of that saying that it's pointless to argue with drunk people. Have you ever heard that before? I feel like this is similar, where it's like, hey, it's pointless. This person might be so convinced that X, Y, and Z is the truth. And sometimes you just got to let it go and just be like, you know what? I'm not going to argue with this fool. I'm just going to be happy. I'm just going to go ahead and make them believe that they're right. Let them have it and just be happy. And maybe you don't even have to make them believe that they're right. Sometimes just not answering at all and letting them just stand there wondering what you really feel is enough. And the other thing too is that she says is look at it from all angles, which is something that I've always tried to do. And I tell my children this all the time, because, you sometimes forget what another person's point of view is, and what those point of views bring as far as emotions go, right? So, like going back to that example with Emily, I can try to put myself in her situation and try to look at her angle, of like, she's just minding her own business, doing nothing, just swinging on there in the playground. And I just came up behind her and I just pushed her. So what's her perspective? It's like, what the heck did I do? Why this? Why are you doing that to me? Like, I was just talking to you. I was being your friend, right? And that helps me feel empathy and compassion for her. And what about the two girls that were bullying me? In their eyes, they were probably feeling very superior, very like entitled, probably right for treating people the way that they were treating them. And there's probably some type of behavior that they picked up either at home or from somebody else. So they might not even see that there's anything wrong with it because maybe that's all they know. So try to look at it from every angle and, you know, try to humble yourself, because I think that sometimes when we're dealing with situations like these, we're not being humble. We're leading everything with ego. Like, oh my gosh, my ego's so hurt. I can't believe you just humiliated me, you know? So I mean, she gives other tips like have a total shift, go somewhere alone, and just let it all out, let it out. Like one of the things that I've had one of my children do is, well, in our house in California, we had a huge yard, and then there was a brick, beautiful wall in the back, and or stone wall. And my husband let her take some like Coke bottles and other bottles that we had, and smash them against the wall from a distance so she wouldn't get hurt, just to let her rage out. And then my other child, I always tell her like, hey, use a pillow, just, go and scream right into your pillow, let it all out. And that helps as well. And then, you get all that out of your system and you're like, okay, I'm done. Okay, I can forgive you now. I'm good. Because it's all about getting that frustration out of your system, all that bad energy. And the other one is, remember that you won't even remember this. Oh my gosh, I tell that to my kids all the time. Like, okay, you go through an argument with a friend and you just met this friend. You've only been friends for like 6 months and you're about to graduate high school. What are the chances that you're going to end up at the very same place and that you're going to be in that person's life forever, right? Probably not likely. So remember that you probably won't even remember this event because it was that person was that insignificant in your life. And the other one is forget about it, which is kind of like the same as what I just said, right? Where number 6, she says, remember that you won't even remember this. And then number 7 is forget about it, to actually intentionally forget about the issue that just happened, that scenario. And lastly, to just love yourself. Love yourself, because you deserve to have that negative energy of anger, resentment, and all of that for somebody that is probably not worth taking up your energy and renting, memory space in your head. So I hope that this helps. I know that it's not easy. I will not judge you because look, it took me years to forgive a certain person. And you just have to be able to live life without all those weights, just being angry at somebody really does drag you down. And I didn't really believe that carrying around that negative energy can really impact the way that you carry yourself in life and how you treat others. And what I mean by that is, like, if you feel like you can't forgive this person, it's like, oh, this person did this to me, and so now I have to be on guard because this other person might do the same thing, and I'm not going to have that. So then you cut yourself the opportunities to have really good relationships with somebody else because of fear that they're going to do the same thing as that person that you did not, the person that you have not forgiven yet, right? So if this resonates with you, please let me know in the comments. If you have any other tips to share so that people can, release that weight from them and all that negative energy so they can forgive and just move forward, please share. And don't forget that your reviews of this podcast matter so, so much. So I would love to read your reviews, and that way people can also kind of have a better idea of what this podcast is all about. So thank you so, so much for listening. Share this podcast, please, with as many people as possible, and be good to yourself. Let it go. And hopefully you'll come back next week and listen to the next podcast. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, did you like that episode? If you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening and write a review. If you want more tips or some behind-the-scenes videos, make sure to follow my mom at Dalitalks on Instagram. You can turn on notifications for her posts and stories as well. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. See you next time.